For 1,000 years, ancient Egypt built structures so precise, so massive, so mathematically perfect, that modern engineers still cannot fully explain how they were constructed. And then they stopped. Not gradually, not slowly, not because they ran out of ideas. They stopped completely, permanently, and they never built another one again. For centuries, historians gave us the same comfortable answer. They simply moved on. They found better ways to honor their dead. The Pyramid Age just ended. But that answer has always had a problem. Because when you look at what was actually happening inside Egypt at the exact moment the pyramids stopped, what was collapsing, what was being hidden, and what certain pharaohs were desperately trying to suppress, a completely different story emerges. Three forces converged at the same moment in Egyptian history. A scientific crisis nobody talks about. A religious revolution that rewrote everything. And a conspiracy that reached all the way to the throne. This is the real reason Egypt stopped building pyramids. And today, we are going inside. To understand why Egypt stopped building pyramids, you first have to understand what it actually took to build one. The Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed around 2560 BC under Pharaoh Khufu. It stands 146 meters tall. It contains 2.3 million individual stone blocks. The average block weighs 2.5 tons. The heaviest weighs 80 tons. And it was built to a mathematical precision so exact that the four sides of its base differ in length by less than 5 centimeters. This was not a primitive civilization guessing their way through construction. This was a society with one purpose: build monuments that would last forever. At its peak, ancient Egypt employed tens of thousands of skilled workers, mathematicians, architects, all working together. The pyramid building era lasted roughly 1,000 years, from around 2650 BC to 1550 BC. During that time, Egyptian pharaohs built over 130 individual pyramids across the desert landscape. Each one was a statement. Each one was a declaration. We are eternal. We cannot be stopped. And then, around 1550 BC, they stopped. The last major pyramid was built. The tools were set down. The quarries went quiet. And Egypt never built another pyramid again. The question that has haunted archaeologists for 2 centuries is simply this: why? The first answer, and the one most mainstream historians are most comfortable with, is purely practical. Egypt ran out of what it needed to keep building. But not what you might think. It was not stone. Egypt had virtually unlimited limestone and granite available in its quarries. It was not manpower. Egypt's population was growing throughout this period. What Egypt was running out of was something far more fundamental: wood. Building pyramids required enormous quantities of timber, not for the pyramids themselves, but for everything that supported the construction. Sledges to drag the stones, boats to transport materials along the Nile, scaffolding, tools, fuel for the workers' camps. Ancient Egypt had almost no natural forests of its own. All of its timber had to be imported, primarily from Lebanon, where the famous cedars of Lebanon provided the strongest and most durable wood in the ancient world. For centuries, Egypt maintained a robust timber trade. Ships sailed regularly between Egyptian ports and Lebanese harbors, returning loaded with cedar logs. But around 1500 BC, investigations have found something began to shift in that trade relationship. The Lebanese cedar forests were being depleted. Other Mediterranean civilizations, the Minoans, the early Greeks, the Phoenicians, were all competing for the same limited timber supply. The cost of importing enough wood to sustain pyramid construction had become economically unsustainable. There was also a crisis of confidence. The bent pyramid, built by Pharaoh Sneferu around 2600 BC, tells a devastating story. Halfway through construction, the builders realized the angle was too steep. The structure was going to collapse. They were forced to change the angle mid-build, producing the distinctive bent shape we see today. The Meidum Pyramid, built around the same era, actually did collapse, catastrophically, during or shortly after construction. These failures sent a message through the Egyptian engineering establishment that could not be ignored. The pyramids were getting harder to build, more expensive, more dangerous, and increasingly, they were failing. Egypt was not just running out of timber, it was running out of the engineering knowledge and organizational capacity to build at the level of its ancestors. And that realization that they could no longer match what came before may have been more devastating than any resource shortage. But the scientific explanation, as compelling as it is, does not answer one crucial question. If Egypt simply could not afford to build pyramids anymore, why did they not build smaller ones? Why did pyramid construction not gradually decrease and eventually fade out? Why did it stop completely, almost overnight, in historical terms? The answer to that question lives not in the quarries or the timber markets. It lives in the temples. Around 1550 BC, the exact period when pyramid construction ended, something extraordinary was happening inside Egyptian religion. The power of the priesthood was exploding. For centuries, the pharaoh had been the absolute center of Egyptian religious life. The pyramids were his tombs, his personal gateway to eternal life. Building them was the highest religious act a pharaoh could perform. But as the New Kingdom period began, around 1550 BC, the priests of Amun, Egypt's most powerful god, had accumulated so much wealth, land, and political influence that they were beginning to rival the pharaoh himself. And the priests of Amun had a very different idea about how to honor the gods. Not pyramids, temples, massive, elaborately decorated temple complexes that would serve as permanent homes for the gods on Earth. Places where priests could perform daily rituals, collect offerings, and, crucially, maintain their own power and influence over the population. Critics argue that the shift from pyramids to temples was not just a religious evolution, it was a deliberate power grab by the priesthood. By redirecting Egypt's construction resources away from Pharaoh's personal tomb and toward communal temple complexes that the priests controlled, the priesthood was effectively transferring the center of Egyptian religious and political power away from the throne and into their own hands. Supporters of this theory point to one extraordinary historical moment that seems to confirm it. Around 1353 BC, roughly 200 years after pyramid construction ended, Pharaoh Akhenaten did something so radical it nearly destroyed Egyptian civilization. He tried to abolish the priesthood entirely. He closed the temples of Amun. He redirected all religious worship to a single god, the Aten, the sun disk. He built an entirely new capital city from scratch, Amarna, specifically to break the power of the priests. And then he died under mysterious circumstances. Within years of his death, every trace of his religious revolution was erased. His name was chiseled off monuments. His city was demolished. The priests of Amun returned to power, more dominant than ever. The fact that a pharaoh felt compelled to wage total war against the priesthood and lost tells us everything about how much power the priests had accumulated since the Pyramid Age ended.